All right, so today we're diving into something a little different, a little darker than usual. We're going deep on Krampus. You've probably heard of him, Europe's anti-Santa.
Ah, yes.
But we're going to dig into some surprising details that you might not know. And we're using this awesome 2015 Smithsonian Magazine article as our guide.
Sounds fascinating.
This article paints a pretty vivid picture of Krampus.
Yeah, what does he look like? I've never actually seen him.
Think half goat, half demon, furry black body, huge horns,
Okay, that's pretty creepy.
and a face that's, well, let's just say it's not jolly.
He doesn't sound like he's bringing any gifts.
Definitely not leaving any milk and cookies for this guy.
Yeah.
He's the punisher of naughty children.
So he's the opposite of Santa Claus.
Exactly. Santa rewards the good kids, but Krampus punishes the bad ones.
How does he punish them?
And it's not just a lump of coal. We're talking birch branch beatings. Even kidnapping.
Kidnapping.
Yeah, he stuffs those misbehaving kids in a sack and takes them away to places unknown.
Wow, that's intense. It makes you wonder if any of those kids ever make it back to the nice list.
Right. So we've got this contrast, reward and punishment, light and dark.
Yeah, that's a theme we see throughout history, isn't it?
It is. And here's something that surprised me. Krampus doesn't work alone.
Oh.
He actually travels with St. Nicholas.
What? Really?
Yeah, they work as a pair, handing out punishment alongside the treats.
So it's like a good cop, bad cop routine.
Exactly. But it's not as straightforward as just good versus evil.
Right.
Krampus's roots go way back.
Yeah, far back are we talking?
Like pre-Germanic paganism.
Wow.
He's even linked to Norse mythology as the son of Hel, the goddess of the underworld.
Oh, Norse mythology. That's interesting.
I know, right? Opens up a whole other dimension to this guy.
So wait, he's the son of Hel.
Yep, the goddess of the underworld.
So maybe he's not purely evil then.
That's a good point. Hel wasn't all about torment. She ruled the underworld, which is a natural part of life and death, right?
Right. It's all about balance.
So maybe Krampus is connected to that idea too. Life and death, reward and punishment.
Exactly. And this all ties into Krampusnacht on December 5th.
Yeah, night things get wild.
Not just about Krampus lurking in the shadows.
Yeah, there's the Krampus run.
Oh, right, where young men dress up in those scary costumes.
Yep, masks, bells, the whole 9 yards.
Parading through the streets, scaring people.
Right, but it's not just a Halloween fright fest, is it?
No, it's much more than that. They say it's a ritual to disperse winter's ghosts.
Like a symbolic cleansing.
Yeah, preparing for the new year by confronting the darkness, driving it away.
So it's almost spiritual then. Facing those inner fears, those darker impulses we all have.
Right, Krampus isn't about suppressing those impulses. It's about acknowledging them, confronting them, maybe even laughing at them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it makes this whole modern resurgence of Krampus even more intriguing.
Resurgence.
Yeah, I mean, he's everywhere these days. Comic books, parties, even a movie. Yeah. Why do you think this darker figure is catching on, especially during the holidays when everything's supposed to be about joy and cheer?
Maybe it's because we're bombarded with sweetness during the holidays. People are looking for something a little more raw, a little more authentic.
Like a counterpoint to that overly commercialized, picture-perfect holiday image?
It could be. Or maybe it's something even deeper. Maybe it's about this human need to acknowledge the shadow side of things, the darkness that's always there alongside the light.
So Krampus, with his gruffness, makes space for that.
Exactly. He's not sugarcoating anything.
He's right there in your face, forcing you to confront the uncomfortable truths. But speaking of uncomfortable truths, this article mentions something that really made me think.
Oh, what's that?
Krampus celebrations happening at the same time as a huge influx of refugees in Austria. So how do you introduce a tradition as terrifying as Krampus to people fleeing war and hardship?
That's a really good question. It could be very traumatic for them, especially the children.
Right, so the article talks about this town, Lienz.
What did they do?
Instead of canceling the Krampus festivities, they decided to educate the refugees about the tradition.
Oh, wow.
They held presentations explaining the costumes, the props, the whole purpose of the Krampus run.
That's amazing. They saw a potential clash, and they chose to bridge the gap through understanding.
Yeah, they didn't just say, this is our tradition, deal with it. They took the time to explain it all.
The nuances, the history, the symbolism behind it.
Imagine if you had just fled a war-torn country. You arrive at a new place, and suddenly you see this terrifying demon figure chasing people through the streets.
Without any context, that would be terrifying.
Exactly. But with understanding, with an explanation, it becomes something different.
A fascinating cultural ritual.
Right. And it makes me wonder, how did the refugees react? Did it change their perception of Krampus? Did it spark any kind of dialogue between the two cultures?
Unfortunately, the article doesn't go into detail about that.
Oh, bummer.
But it raises those questions about how traditions evolve in a globalized world.
It's like Krampus, this ancient figure, is suddenly part of this conversation about cultural sensitivity and awareness.
Exactly.
It makes me think, how often do we encounter things that seem strange or even offensive, but we might understand them better if we just took the time to ask questions and listen to different perspectives?
That's a challenge we all face in an increasingly interconnected world, holding on to our own traditions while being open to new experiences and new perspectives.
Exactly. And that's something to think about. What are some traditions or beliefs that you hold dear? How would you explain them to someone from a completely different background?
We'll be back after a short break to continue our deep dive into the world of Krampus. Stay tuned.
I can't wait.
We're back and still deep in the world of Krampus. You know, we've been talking about his origins and his role as punisher of naughty children.
Right, and that connection to Norse mythology.
Exactly, and how this centuries-old tradition is kind of bumping up against modern ideas about, cultural sensitivity.
Especially with the influx of refugees into Europe. Yeah, it's a real-world example of what we were talking about before, navigating different cultural perspectives.
Yeah, we were talking about that town in Austria, Lanz.
Right, Lanz. Instead of canceling the Krampus celebrations, they took a different approach.
They decided to educate the refugees about the tradition.
Yeah, they organized those presentations to explain the whole thing.
The costumes, the props, the whole Krampus run.
It's amazing. Imagine being a refugee arriving in a new country, and then you see these terrifying figures running around.
Oh, yeah. Talk about culture shock.
Right. It was a gamble, for sure.
But it shows their commitment to inclusivity and to keeping their traditions.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, though, how do the refugees react?
Did those presentations really help?
Did it change how they saw Krampus?
That's the big question, right? The article doesn't really go into the refugee side of the story.
I know. It's like a cliffhanger. We see Linz's good intentions, but we don't know the impact.
It would be fascinating to know what the refugees thought.
Right. It makes me think about how we often think good intentions are enough.
But real understanding needs more than that.
We need to listen to the other side,
Exactly. We can't just assume that explaining our traditions will make everyone feel comfortable.
And it makes you wonder if this encounter had any lasting effects on the Krampus tradition itself.
Did it lead to any changes?
Did they tone down the scary parts?
Maybe it sparked a whole conversation about how to make the tradition more inclusive.
Right. It shows that culture is always changing.
Traditions aren't set in stone.
So where does this leave Krampus in today's world? I mean, is he just a European thing, or could he become more global?
It's hard to say. He's got deep roots in European history and folklore.
But we've seen him pop up in American pop culture.
Yeah, in movies and comic books.
There's something about him that goes beyond geography.
Right. Maybe it's that we're all fascinated by the darker side of things.
The shadow side that every culture has.
Maybe. Or maybe people are just tired of all the sweetness and commercialism of the holidays.
Krampus is a little more raw, a little more real.
He's like saying, hey, it's okay to not be perfectly jolly all the time.
Right. Let's acknowledge the stress, the family drama.
It's all part of the holidays.
He gives us permission to be imperfect.
To embrace the chaos and even find some humor in it.
And beyond the scary stuff, there's that deeper idea that Krampus represents balance.
Right, that counterpoint to St. Nicholas.
It's not just good versus evil. It's about recognizing the duality in everything.
That interplay of light and dark, reward and punishment.
It's in our myths, our religions, even our psychology.
We're complex beings.
We're capable of both good and bad.
And maybe that's why Krampus appeals to us. He shows us the parts of ourselves that we usually try to hide, the less than perfect parts.
He gives them a face, a story.
He reminds us that life isn't always pretty or easy.
There are shadows alongside the light.
And maybe by facing those shadows, we can find some balance.
It's like Krampus, this creature of punishment, is actually telling us to accept ourselves.
To see our imperfections as part of what makes us human.
A powerful message, right? Especially during the holidays when we feel all that pressure to be perfect.
Krampus is like saying it's okay to be real. It's okay to not have it all together.
Embrace the mess, the chaos, the darkness.
That's where the real growth happens.
It's such a different way of looking at things. It's not about denying the darkness.
It's about integrating it, making peace with it.
And, it brings us back to that connection with Norse mythology.
Krampus as the son of hell.
Right. Hell wasn't just evil. She was a representation of the cycle of life and death.
So maybe Krampus isn't all bad either.
Maybe he's a force that helps maintain balance.
A reminder of the natural order.
He's like saying, look, death and darkness are part of life too. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
It's like he's a personification of winter itself.
With its harshness and darkness.
But also its potential for renewal and change.
Exactly. It all comes back to that idea of duality.
You know, this conversation has really changed how I think about Krampus. I'm seeing him less as a monster and more as a complex and wise figure.
He's challenging us to look deeper.
To embrace the full human experience.
And we hope you'll continue this journey with us. Explore those myths and traditions.
Ponder what Krampus might mean to you.
Because the most interesting thing about him isn't his scary looks or his punishments.
It's how he reflects our own minds and our culture.
He's a mirror to our fears, our desires, and how we see the world.
And as we learn more about him, we might learn more about ourselves too.
Now, after a short break, we'll dive into Krampus's modern comeback and what it says about our culture today.
Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey with Krampus, from his ancient origins to his complex symbolism and even his encounter with modern cultural shifts.
It's amazing how a figure often viewed as simply a scary Christmas demon can spark such profound reflections on tradition, culture, and human nature.
Yeah. And now let's shift our focus to the present day, to this fascinating resurgence of Krampus in modern culture. We've touched on it before, but I think it deserves a closer look. Comic books, parties, movies. Krampus is everywhere these days.
It is a curious phenomenon. You'd think a figure associated with punishment and fear wouldn't exactly be a crowd pleaser.
Right. You'd expect him to be lurking in the shadows, not strutting down the red carpet. So what's driving this renewed interest? Why is this darker, more menacing figure capturing our imaginations, especially during a time of year when everything's supposed to be about twinkling lights and good cheer?
Well, as we discussed earlier, it could be a reaction to the often over-commercialized, overly sweet portrayal of the holidays. Maybe people are craving something a bit edgier, a bit more authentic, even if it comes with a touch of darkness.
Yeah, it's like we're pushing back against that picture-perfect holiday image, that pressure to be perfectly happy and cheerful all the time. Krampus, with his gruff demeanor and his birch branch beatings, is a reminder that it's okay to not be okay.
He gives us permission to acknowledge the stress, the family drama, the imperfections that are all part of the holiday experience. He's saying, hey, it's okay to feel a little grumpy, a little mischievous, even a little scared. It's all part of being human.
He's a reality check, reminding us that life isn't always candy canes and carols. But this resurgence isn't just about individual catharsis, is it? It seems like Krampus is tapping into something bigger, a cultural shift towards embracing darker themes and entertainment as a whole.
Absolutely. We see it in the popularity of shows like Stranger Things and The Walking Dead, movies like The Babadook and Get Out. There's a growing appetite for stories that explore the complexities of human nature, the shadows that lurk beneath the surface.
It's like we're no longer content with simple feel-good narratives. We're craving stories that reflect the messiness, the uncertainty, even the darkness of the world we live in.
Perhaps it's a reflection of the increasingly complex and challenging times we're living in, or maybe we're just finally ready to acknowledge the full spectrum of human experience, both the light and the dark.
And Krampus, with his unapologetic darkness, fits right into that. He's not sugarcoating anything. He's not here to make you feel warm and fuzzy. He's here to shake things up, to challenge your assumptions, to make you think.
He forces us to confront those uncomfortable truths, those aspects of ourselves and our world that we'd rather not think about. Maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what we need in order to grow, to evolve, to become more whole.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Krampus, I want to leave you with this thought. Krampus is more than just a scary Christmas demon. He's a symbol of our times, a reflection of our evolving cultural landscape. He's a reminder that embracing the darkness, the shadows, the imperfections can ultimately lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
He challenges us to question our assumptions, to embrace complexity, to find the balance between light and dark, joy and sorrow, good and evil.
And who knows, maybe by confronting those shadows, those things that scare us, those things we'd rather ignore, we can actually find a deeper sense of peace and acceptance. So as we head into this holiday season, let's not be afraid to acknowledge the Krampus within us all. Let's embrace the messiness, the imperfections, the full spectrum of human experience, because it's in those shadows that we often find the most profound truths. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.